The House of Representatives ended up approving $1 billion for Israel's Iron Dome defense system after all. Now, I say after all because earlier in the week, progressives succeeded in blocking it as a provision in the stopgap measure that's meant to fund the government up through December of 22. Now, since progressives succeeded in blocking it, House Democrats decided to bring forward a standalone bill that would offer $1 billion in funding to the Iron Dome in Israel. And since that has bipartisan support, meaning that Republicans would, of course, vote in favor of that bill as well, progressives had far less leverage. Now, the measure cleared the House in a bipartisan vote of 420 to 9. 8 Democrats and 1 Republican voted against the funding for the missile defense system. 2 other Democrats, Hank Johnson of Georgia and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, voted present. So we're going to get to AOC in just a second, but I do want to provide just a few names, or all the names of people who actually voted against the funding bill. You have that 1 Republican, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky. The other 8 Democrats who voted against it include Ilhan Omar, of course, Rashida Tlaib, we'll get to her as well in a minute, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, Andre Carson, Marie Newman, and Shui Garcia. Oh, and also Raul Grijalva of Arizona. So those are the ones who voted against it. And look, AOC changed her vote. First, it was a no vote, and then she changed it to present. And then you saw videos of her crying on the House floor while being embraced by other Democratic lawmakers. Let's watch.
Designated by Mr. Lawson of Florida, pursuant to House Resolution 8, I inform the House that Mr. Lawson will vote nay on House Resolution 483 amendments. He votes nay.
So, you see her, crying and being embraced on the corner. So, Nando, I'm going to let you handle it first in terms of commentary. I talked about this on TYT last night, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, I'll start with the fact that just this bill was able to sail through. I mean, it's depressing because, like, you see, like, oh my God, the progressives, they were able to block this thing in the continuing resolution, and then in like record time, they just they can, it's just like the bill happens and it sails right through. It's like it just goes to show what kind of stuff sails through Congress and what kind of stuff gets gridlocked in Congress. That anything that helps the American people, that doesn't sail through. Funding another country's missile defense system, that sails through. That aspect of it is totally depressing. The AOC thing, I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. I mean, tax the rich in order to fund the Iron Dome. I mean, what a week she's had. Just I find it to be not just a cowardly decision, which it is. There is some political calculation to it, that she thinks like, oh, well, there's a lot of Israel supporters in my district and certainly in New York State. And if I ever want to run for Senate or governor, this vote might come back to haunt me and blah, blah, blah. But I find it hard to believe that anyone who would be dissuaded from voting for AOC because of a no vote on the Iron Dome would be like, oh, look, no, she voted president. No, she's good on Israel. Like,
right.
There's just there's just there's no world in which some other Democrat who's running against her is just going to take out a much more maximalist position on Israel. And no one, no Israel supporter actually believes that AOC is an ally. So the only thing she achieves by doing that is to make herself look pathetic, by not just changing her vote at the last second, but then crying on the House floor. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. You're a congressperson, get it together. And, it just makes you look unbelievably weak, cowardly, pathetic. I mean, just all bad words that you can associate it with. There's no benefit for it. You have to, on some level, you have to stick to your guns, and people respect that, even if they disagree with a specific thing. Right. There's a broader point to be made, but that's my immediate reaction to the AOC thing. It's like, what are you doing? I mean, especially after you do this whole charade in the Met Gala with the dress, this kind of quote unquote radical act. And then when push comes to shove in the halls of power, you act like a total coward. So I don't know how. There's no way to defend her in this. There's just no. I don't know. I don't like to do the AOC bashing that others like to do, but like this one is just like it's indefensible. There's nothing you can do to defend it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look, I agree with you, and I know you have a broader point, and it's actually an excellent broader point. Hold on to that thought because I want you to share it. But with AOC, I totally agree with you. I mean, and I love that you put it in the context of the whole Met Gala situation, right? Because it goes to the argument that I was trying to make. I don't know if I made it in an articulate way, but I was trying to make a point about how she's a powerful member of Congress. Now, I get that she's one member of Congress, and so people try to minimize her power in that way, but she's a household name. I mean, she could get a lot done just by using the bully pulpit. And to be sure, there have been instances of her flexing her power in that way that has been successful. But more importantly, like here's a recent example of her doing something that I thought was powerful, and she should lean into this type of behavior more often. She decided to call Joe Manchin out on his corruption, just brazenly, like just called him out, right? And then that led to CNN's Dana Bash asking him about his, personal financial interest, his donors, and all of that. And so for the first time, you have corporate Democrats on corporate media playing defense to progressives. So like, you're a powerful person. Like, if you want to raise taxes on the rich, then get it done. I know you can't do it unilaterally, but you're powerful enough to fight for it in a way that's far more substantive than wearing a dress at the Met Gala. And then immediately after that, you get this present vote. And look, that's the thing. You hit the nail on the head, right? It's I don't mind members of Congress crying either on the House or Senate floor, right? There have been examples of them being emotional about something tragic that's happened while they're giving their speeches. That's totally fine. But in this context, not only did it appear weak when she changed her vote last minute from no to present, then crying about it, it's almost as if it's like letting everyone know, I didn't want to do this, but I did it for political purposes. And that makes the situation worse. It makes it worse. Anyway, like Jamal Bowman, he voted in favor of the funding, and he's not getting as much blowback because, and I completely disagree with his vote. His vote is, in terms of like substantively, it's worse, right? Like in terms of like what it actually represents in the number of votes and all that stuff. I get that. But optics wise, it looks worse for AOC. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, I mean, the Jamal Bowman thing kind of feeds in nicely to my broader point, in that Jamal Bowman's like a good guy, like we like Jamal Bowman. His heart's probably in the right place. But, the idea that, from a left perspective, from like a socialist perspective, like the idea that all we have to do is elect more people whose heart is in the right place is misguided. Because if you elect 200 Congress people whose heart is in the right place, who are just a bunch of AOCs or Jamal Bowmans, without a mechanism to enforce discipline, to enforce some sort of collective block discipline on them, then it's useless. The political calculations will always come into play in ways that on an individual level might make rational sense. Now, first of all, I disagree with the AOC thing, that I think she made the wrong political calculation, but it was a cynical political calculation nonetheless. I just think she made a mistake. Jamal Bowman made a cynical political calculation as well. And he probably played it better by just being like, yeah, fuck it, I'll vote for it. From that kind of thing. But without a party organization that is internally democratic, but that once it's decided, like can enforce some sort of party discipline, it's kind of useless. It really is. So again, I think that we often get so invested in what's really in these people's hearts because we don't have that mechanism. Like, that's why there's so much left speculation is like, what does AOC really, believe? And I get it because it's a result of like the absence of any party mechanism to force her to take the right stands that when we need them to. But the reality is that we should strive to build an institution where it wouldn't matter, like where we could have like these like awful cretin, power-hungry cretins in there that are bad people or don't have their heart in the right place, but are forced to act in the right way because of institutional power behind it. And I think that obviously, like with AOC, she's always going to be compared to Bernie Sanders. She's just by the nature of their political trajectories. And Bernie Sanders is a person that, because of his long track record and his ability to actually get things done, and his ability to sort of maintain a certain level of ethical purity in a way in the face of like this awful system, has earned a significant amount of trust. But Bernie Sanders is not replicable. We're seeing it with AOC. Like it's so easy to get sucked into, the celebrity aspect of it, the realpolitik aspect of it. When Nancy Pelosi leans on you, it's really scary. If you're some, 29-year-old congressperson in there for the first time, like all those things are weighing on her in a way that is causing her to do all this stuff. And again, it's because we don't have this institutional power to support her, but also to discipline her. It goes both ways. Like it gives her power by giving her a strong support base, but also it's like if you deviate, you're out, and you will lose power. So and that's what's really going on here. And again, I understand the sort of obsessive reading of the tea leaves on AOC because she is so famous and has been able to, for whatever reason, have that it factor that kind of causes you to become a known person. There's like hundreds of congressmen people never even heard of. Sometimes people in their own district, they don't know who the fuck their congressman is. But everyone knows who AOC is. So that brings in a huge amount of scrutiny, but also it brings with it this desire to be like, is she going to be the next Bernie? Is she going to be this person that within this rotten system is going to be able to maintain a certain level of, ethical kind of grounding that Bernie has, that we know intrinsically, like we know it, we just know it because we see it and because he's proven it time and time again. She has not. And because Bernie's kind of a unicorn and that model is not very replicable, what we really need to do is find a way to institutionally build an organization that will both strengthen her but also discipline her.
So I wanted to look, I mean, we've been very critical, but I do also want to show some love to members of Congress who did the right thing. And since they did the right thing, they were then called anti-Semitic on the House floor. And so, let me give you context before we go to Rashida Tlaib. Okay. So listen, we have been providing tens of billions of dollars to Israel. Okay. So I'll give you one example. In 2016, under the Obama administration, $38 billion was appropriated to Israel for military funding. So there's military aid to the tune of $38 billion. On top of that, we also provide, some additional foreign aid yearly. So the United States has already provided $1.6 billion to Israel for Iron Dome batteries, interceptors, co-production costs, and maintenance, according to a 2020 report from the Congressional Research Service. And of that $1.6 billion last year, that was appropriated in 2020 during the pandemic, they used like $500 million of that toward the Iron Dome. And remember, the Iron Dome is Raytheon's all up in that, right? So it's a way of also, excuse me,
Salud.
Redistributing. Thank you. Redistributing, taxpayer money to private defense contractors. So it's not like, you'll hear the fear mongering about, oh, you don't believe in Israel's right to defend itself or to exist or to do this or that. But like, this was additional. This was like an extra little cherry on top, $1 billion in funding. Your dog is so freaking cute. That's exactly what we needed right now.
I'm alone with her today. So she's in the room with me and she was just kind of like having a little nervous moment. So I just needed to give her a little love. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that context, why don't we go to Rashida Tlaib and what she had to say on the House floor before she voted against this bill.
We cannot be talking only about Israelis' need for safety at a time when Palestinians are living under a violent apartheid system and are dying from what Human Rights Watch has said are war crimes. We should also be talking about Palestinian need for security from Israeli attacks. We must be consistent in our commitment to human life, period. Everyone deserves to be safe there.
Everyone deserves to be safe there. I totally agree with what she had to say, but not everyone agreed. Representative, I believe Ted Deutsch, is that his first name, from Florida, decided to go up after her and basically imply that she's anti-Semitic. Let's watch.
Mr. Speaker, we can have an opportunity to debate lots of issues on the House floor, but to falsely characterize the state of Israel is consistent with those, let's be clear, it's consistent with those who advocate for the dismantling of the one Jewish state in the world. And when there is no place on the map for one Jewish state, that's anti-Semitism.
I mean, but that was to be expected. And I just find it fascinating because anytime a progressive has justified criticism toward a fellow Democratic lawmaker, I mean, it's the worst thing he or she could possibly do. But I mean, here you have Ted Deutsch on the House floor say that Rashida Tlaib is anti-Semitic, that she's in line with anti-Semites. I mean, it's insane.
It's insane. Yeah, I mean, these people would never, you know, if the Iron Dome was just a kind of a defensive, you know, thing, they would never give Gaza an Iron Dome, you know, to intercept Israeli missiles when they you know, when they shoot it at them. I mean, and just the idea that like we have to pay for it. I mean, Israel has socialized healthcare like as a human right. Like they Israeli citizens enjoy better healthcare than Americans, and we're paying for their fucking Iron Dome. I mean, it's like it's just like they can pay for it if they want their stupid Iron Dome, which has questionable kind of worth in terms of like it actually working. They can pay for it themselves. Like, why do we have to pay for it? It's so infuriating, and the fact that it just kind of sails through Congress, and it's not just seen as kind of inevitable, but it's seen as like this almost like duty that we have, and it's just it's so everything about it is so infuriating. If you enjoyed this video from Jacobin Weekends, please hit like and subscribe. That way, you'll enjoy all of our backlog, as well as all of our future content, including interviews, live streams, and clips. Thank you.